Okay, we're live on YouTube now.
All
right.
I'll start admitting na po, ma'am.
Yep, go. I'm the technical as well. It is interesting to note the magnitude of how we assert, even unknowingly, the map and time zone of our world to understand and map the rest of the world, which is to me a stark contemporary example and exercise of colonialist logocentrism. I will give the floor to you, Dr. Dana Davida, everyone.
To begin, it is 4 a.m. in Montreal, Quebec, and here we are together virtually in the flesh, if not in the same room. So, what is being gained and what is lost in this brave new pandemic world? Death and destruction are sadly unbearably prominent. Yet, ever committed to optimism and joy, as you can see, I remain attentive to the ways in which this extraordinary moment of multiple crises is propelling us to design a better world for all of its inhabitants, flora, and fauna. Artistic ecosystems are quickly reconfiguring to usher in more equity and sustainability. Performing artists are boldly reinventing liveness in cyberspace as they transpose performance into digital formats. Curators are asking what event making might look like when being together is not an option. Some aesthetic philosophers have speculated that art making is a biological imperative, others that it's a purposeful social invention. What is clear now, our art worlds are eminently persistent and resilient. Are all of these experiments necessary and equally effective? Are artists becoming internet refugees, longing for the real world of physical venues with live audiences? Which of these digital performance forms will and should endure beyond the crisis to become a permanent part of the artistic landscapes? And will new theater buildings, as arts administrator Louis Yu has suggested, seek to include sound and video production and presentation studios with these new digital live arts forms as a permanent part of their programming? I'll leave you with an incisive thought on the future nature of the curatorial vocation. What we need now are brave and honest curators with curiosity. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to start off by saying, Dana, it's always a delight to listen to you because you always restore my belief in humanity to some extent. And we really need that right now. How do we enact not just one, but many mindful moments as Roselle's and Dana's invocations of First Peoples nations presaging demonstrate to us? How do we keep acting and moving when we are likely setting ourselves up for misreadings, transgressing of safe bounds, as well as the welcome gracious accidents of shared humanity? Can we keep sharp and not merely consign ourselves to being embedded in the camouflaging of soft capitalism that Amelia Jones so clearly put in her keynote yesterday? How do we put up a brave fight and not merely ride the tide? What might these endless but needed repositionings and flexings do to our practices in the long run? Hopefully, they turn us into beings more mindful and more acutely attuned to caring moments, caring faces, caring practices that no longer remain anchored to the rigidity of objects, programs, and striations of space-time, wholly in service of consumption and waste. We need to daily refuse to wholly get lost, indulging ourselves in pandemic paralysis amidst the time-space impasse that state mercenary touting of health and safety restrictions push us into. Our actions may essentially be short-sighted for now, but hopefully not merely self-gratifying and woefully survivalist. Thank you.
I think those two presentations give us a very good perspective of what is happening in different parts of the world, which are also connected in many ways.
Let's start talking to Elena and Herbert. So what is the challenge? What is the process?
She wanted to do this. She wanted to do a process-based research of choreographing online.
So we want to contribute in this way. We can engage with fellow artists. In this way, we can go beyond our reach. We know that there is this sense of rediscovering what is unfamiliar. Unfamiliar meaning, in terms of person, we know we have friendship. We've created friendship in this community of dance, but we are not so familiar in terms of how do we work, how do we dialogue, how do we figure things out. And so in choreography, how do we articulate in our body? How do we teach?
Just keep the comments coming. And so this is an ongoing conversation. And I'm happy to be part of that conversation. Your video.
Yes, please turn on your video and please give us your most beautiful, sweetest, and biggest smile.
Sweetest.
All right, so please stay smiling because there are 2 pages. Okay, ready? Smile.
All right, everybody, welcome. To start this gathering, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. To start this gathering, almost like a ritual, allow me to acknowledge the Darawal people who are the traditional custodians of the land wherein I'm temporarily located. I'm in Wollongong, New South Wales, Australia right now. I also acknowledge their people's elders past, present, and emerging. Yesterday was a cold, rainy day. For us, today is even colder, drearier, and more damp than yesterday. We just received warnings of thunderstorms and flood, but not the way we have it in the Philippines. October is Indigenous Peoples Month also in the Philippines, and we open each day to honor and acknowledge the many First Nations peoples who are the traditional custodians of the many lands on where we stand on today. Around this time in 2016, before the PCI was conceptualized, I was addressing a pool of performing artists and presenters from rural Canada, including First Nations performing arts curators, and narrating the brutal murder of 3 Indigenous leaders and educators from the Lumad, a collective term for Indigenous peoples in Mindanao, Philippines, Tribal School Alcadev in Lianga, Surigao del Sur, Jonel Campos, Aurelio Sinso, and Executive Director of the Tribal School Emerito Samarca. And while we are gaining small victories in this struggle to fight for land rights and culture of Indigenous peoples and other marginalized sectors in our society, for example, on the reconciliation and recognition projects that were launched in Australia and Canada, the struggle is far from over. Indigenous peoples are still being killed and hamleted from their ancestral lands, even during the pandemic. Hence, on this month, on Indigenous Peoples Month, we not only acknowledge but hopefully pledge our continuing support for their fight for their land, rights, cultural pride, self-determination, and freedom. I am Rosel Pineda, the PCI Artistic Curator and Founder. Welcome to the 3rd day of the PCI International Symposium 2020 Conversations on Curation and Performance in the time of halting and transformation. So let me start the session by extending again our utmost gratitude to all of you who came and conversed with us during the presentation of Dr. Davida and Professor Eileen Ramirez, as well as the various exchange programs. And as I was reflecting on the participants' behavior, psyche, and even somatic experience in this type of setting, which were also the core of Dana and Eileen's discussion yesterday, I just got information that one of our presenters yesterday actually delivered his sharing or pitch while in the process of a commute going home. For those of you who have not been to the Philippines, commuting in the Philippines is an adventure, and that is an understatement. And so to deliver a pitch while doing that, that must be another level of somatic experience in this conundrum that we are in. And Piersandra is going to talk about urban dramaturgy, and this would be an interesting insight for her as well. And I'm thoroughly amused. Prior to this amusement, I was thinking of the word and concept of acedia, which I just also encountered recently, this morning, in fact, which is an old Greek term to mean, and as described by a monk and theologian, John Cassian, as early as 5th century BC, and I quote, acedia is like a mind seized by the emotion, and it's horrified at where he is, disgusted with his room. It does not allow him to stay still in his cell or to devote any effort to reading. He feels such bodily listlessness and yawning hunger as though he were worn by a long journey or prolonged fast. Next, he glances out. He sighs that no one is coming to see him. Constantly in and out of his cell, he looks at the sun as if it were too slow in setting. Acedia is the common thread in all of the conversations that transpired yesterday, this feeling. From Dana and Eileen's presentation to the responses of the participants, the parallel conversations in the exchange cafe rooms, and even the videos that were presented. Acedia is very much at the core of our sharing, and also the prompt to be grounded on this being, acedia. Being that was already prompted since the beginning of the symposium. A kind of being grounded to where we are as persons as well as peoples. To be mindful, forgiving, and caring of ourselves for being distracted, anxious, sometimes lost, but also to be self-reflexive of our positions, especially in relation to others, and how we participate in maintaining that fucked up world that brought us here. And so we may be able to have a hint on how to change it and how we could participate in changing the world. For example, in the same instance that Canadian and Australian governments have launched reconciliation and recognition programs in relation to how the First Nations peoples in their lands, these governments are also party to allowing big Canadian and Australian multinational mining companies to commit crimes and brutally displace the First Nation peoples in places like ours, the Philippines. Hence, acedia, or recognizing that there is a label for our existential moment in the time of crisis, should go beyond these musings, but allow these musings to be a part of more caring and just, important, a just world for all beings. A sublational process that bears the double motion of preservation, of caring for oneself, and negation of that world, of transforming to become. I suppose this is the kind of fluidity that is being invoked in how we move from one conversation to another in this symposium, and possibilities of organic encounters, albeit temporal moments that we have. Maybe this is also the lesson of acedia now, being grounded on the wholes, but never losing the sight of the whole. What was comforting and at the same time disturbing about yesterday's conversation is that, yes, to borrow Eileen's phrase, it does bring back a certain sense of humanity in us. And humanity is both joy and heartache. The focus and distraction, the anxiety and resilience, the weakness and the strength. Humanity is being able to be forgiving and also laugh at the postman on the door while you are presenting in the middle of an international symposium, of sharing your work with colleagues while riding a jeepney or an MRT, of sinking into the relief of honoring our indigenous elders, past, present, and future, and think about the elders and youth, past, present, who are still being killed because of the continuing fight for land rights and culture. And hopefully, really, 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 really change the future. And finally, humanity is asking, trying to answer, yes, but then asking again, why are you here? Why are you participating? Why are you in this symposium? Why the hell am I being asked to behave according to Zoom protocols when my internet connection cannot even behave well? Ask, and sometimes that is more than enough, grounding to have a sense of the next step, or the next vision, or the next question. At the very least, you will not bear the thought of reading that typo-ridden Zoom protocols that we flash after today. So, thank you and welcome again to day 3 of this symposium. You see how this symposium has flowed from one conversation to another as Marika of DABI, Dance Base Yokohama, and I have an ongoing conversation regarding the underlying curatorial frame of this conversation and how it flows from one another and ripple, or maybe from some form, some waves as we go along in these conversations. And today's conversation, I'm certain, will not only add to those ripples, but probably even shift some directions or expand them, as our presenters are wave makers as well. Today's session will be moderated by Professor Lujay Sonido from the University of the Philippines. As she holds an MA in Film Studies from the same university. She is a video artist, a critic, and my longtime video collaborator. She did Sagot with me, which you saw on the first day. And presently, she is the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs in the University of the Philippines. Woo-hoo-hoo. So please wave, Lujay, if your video is on so that people might recognize you. Anyway, they will see your beautiful face later.
Hello, hello.
All right. So, of course, our presenters for today are festival curators and directors and educators and dramaturgs, Myra Beltran from the Philippines and Dr. Piersandra de Matteo from Italy. So we are also in the presence of a pioneer today, especially to the formation of an independent contemporary dance community in the Philippines, Myra Beltran. Myra, please wave. She initiated Contemporary Dance Map in 2005 and the Wi-Fi Body Festival in 2006. The teaser for Wi-Fi Body 2020 you saw a while ago. Aside from this, Myra received the Alab ng Haraya Flame of Inspiration for individual recognition in the performing arts from the National Commission for Culture and the Arts in 2001 and the Tanging Parangal from the City in Manila in 2007. She is a tireless, if not resilient, practitioner and mentor on contemporary dance in the Philippines. Please welcome Myra. Yes. And for our second presenter, I am most thrilled and honored to welcome Dr. Piersandra Di Matteo from Bologna, Italy.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, and the PCI network. I'm personally thrilled because we have a similar practice in directing operas and dramaturging operas and curating festivals. And I'm interested in how those practices influence one another. But she is also a published scholar as well as an educator who is currently co-heading the program for performing arts curation in the University of UAV. Please correct my pronunciation. UAV in the University of Venice. In Venice.
In Venice, yes.
In Venice, yeah.
Yeah, in Venice, yes.
All right. Her curatorial, okay, not this, I'm not sure I will be able to pronounce well. Her curatorial work, El Volpe Dice El Corvo, was
Perfect. You're pronouncing. You
well,
speak Italian.
well, the Filipino is very similar to Italian conjugation, so that maybe is the key. Was awarded the UBU Prize for Best Curatorial Organizational Project in 2014. She is currently the artistic curator of Atlas of Transitions Biennale in Bologna and currently collaborating as dramaturge with the Argentine director Lola Arias and the Cuban artist Tania Bruguera, whom Dr. Jones also mentioned in her paper, and I think will be mentioned in another paper 2 days from now, from the Sydney Biennale experience. I'm certain, again, sorry, I got lost a bit. So again, please welcome and please wave Dr. Piersandra Di Matteo. So we will start with Myra's presentation first, followed by Dr. Di Matteo, and then Prof. Lou J. Sonido will take it on from there for the open forum before we break out into various rooms again. Give the spotlight now to Myra. Thank you, everybody, and welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, I will stop sharing. I cannot give a spotlight. This is my cue. All right. Stop sharing.
Hi, thank you and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for PCI for inviting me, and amongst these esteemed presenters, I'm more of a practitioner and not really in the academe, but I will share my experience today. I also do not have too much of a distance from the initiative that I'm going to talk about, and I'm currently in the midst of helping roll out the next one in late October. So my point of view is coming from an outsider of an institution while also co-curating one of its programs and navigating that terrain. So I'm going to talk about Wi-Fi Body, a choreographer's competition for the solo duet form, part of the Cultural Center of the Philippines CCP choreographer series, which migrated online this year on the request of the CCP as the institution's pandemic response. I must say that initially I just wanted to stream old programs just to comply with the request, because like all the rest of us in this pandemic, I too questioned all the paradigms under which we were heretofore operating in, including how we create and produce art. But in a conversation with other dance artists, I felt their need to create, the need to do something and not atrophy. Thus, I felt that though meager, the funds still amounted to something as opposed to having nothing at all. I saw myself as being the channel through which public funds could flow to artists. So I agreed to staging an initiative that would produce new work in dance within the pandemic. Coming also on the heels of the CCP's Virgin Lab Fest, I also decided early on that Wi-Fi Body would be pre-recorded, given the lack of technical equipment and standby internet connectivity for most dance artists. First, the name, Wi-Fi Body, as a name, in fact, already conveyed an online presence. Historically, however, the name was appropriated by its precursors to describe the live performance, to convey the act of coming together by independent artists who were wirelessly connected to the greater idea of dance. And this as a contemporary dance festival. The decision to append two words, virtual and body, as virtual body, signified not only that the project was now online, that is addressing the platform of conveyance, but in two words, to signify that it was the body that was to be experienced virtually. What kind of virtual body that would be, I will explain later. Having said that, I wish to discuss the curation of Wi-Fi Body as multiple levels of performance making, the curation itself as performative. The realization that it was came from the encounter of what kind of labor was to be distributed, and also as it was to be rolled online, the performativity of that act, given social media consumption. Erin Branigan, in her dance film, Choreography and the Moving Image, asked, quote, "Can we determine where the dance ends and the dance film begins?" End of quote. I use the one word dance film by Branigan as I believe it is a more inclusive term, especially for future historicizing in the Philippines. I use Branigan's term filmic performance as she defines it to mean, quote, "a comprehensive term incorporating all aspects of cinematic production so that the choreographic quality of the dance film can be considered in relation to both the pro-filmic and the filmic elements." End of quote. The pro-filmic, quote, refers to the events as they occur in real time at the moment of filming, end quote, and is therefore that aspect of the initiative that coincides with the live event and refers to the writing on the dancing body. Such that in what follows, I will point out what was properly the filmic performance and the choreographic performance of the dancing body, which is the pro-filmic, and as shared by the acting principles in the conceptualization of the curation. Both performances, the pro-filmic and the filmic, will be mentioned in relation to the production process. The third level of performance to note in this curation is, as mentioned, the performance online. The rolling out of the events, as it were, all in consideration of behavior in social media, the incessantness and frivolity, I would say, of that consumption. The timing, the quality of the copies that accompanied the post, I saw as quite performative and worthy of discussion here. Second, the call for entries. Traditionally quite generic, stating citizenship, qualification as emerging choreographer, duration of the final work with no sets, just props integrated in the dance and minimal lighting cues. The rollout of the 2020 call for entries set the parameters for what kind of dance film, as it were, within the range of dance films. 1. The call specified that the location should be in the domestic space. This is during the strict lockdown period, with any number of spaces, but that the proposal should rationalize why and how a specific site chosen contributed to the piece's overall theme or concept. This at once distinguished the initiative from other output online of dancers, which, truth be told, I consider documentations of dance located in available areas within the domestic space, as in them, the location could be anywhere, the sense of place not being incorporated and conceptualized within the dance. Our call instead emphasized the desire for innovative propositions on the use of space in the kinesthetic and architectural possibilities of the body within the chosen space. 2, the call announced that it was interested in the minute choreographic possibilities of the body, therefore in close-up of body parts. For as long as within the course of the work, the full body was seen within the frame. With this too, a distinction was made from the straight dance documentary, and we ventured more into dance film territory. However, we also declared that we were not staging a screen dance initiative, and the emphasis would still be on the writing of the body. That is, no choreography in the edit. For instance, repetitions of choreography had to be performed by the dancing body in the pro-filmic setting and not by technological manipulation in post-production. In this, we kept the aim of Wi-Fi body, which is to discover emerging choreographers in the form of a choreographer's competition. Overall, the performance in the call for entries signaled the initiative's location within the realm of dance film works and its signal difference from dance documentation. An aside, I would like to mention that the call for entries video has me performing mostly in it, and in those clips, mostly shot by me. In short, I subjected myself to the same process and workflow I had designed for the initiative, and having bodily experienced that process, was more confident of its design. Bearing in mind as well that the initiative was always designed for the solo duet form from its inception, there was the sense that the transfer to the domestic location all the more stretched the possibilities for choreographic exploration, and furthermore, underlined the inquiry on the politics of modes of production in dance, given the paradigm shifts that the pandemic seemed to be surfacing on how art was to be produced and consumed in what would be a new normal. That's my confidence in the shift to the virtual platform. Third, the production process. From 33 submissions, we chose 10. Similar to previous editions, choreographer mentors were part of the early and late process, because Wi-Fi Body is framed as a choreographer's competition, but its main goal is to discover emerging choreographers with a mentoring component. This time around, apart from 3 choreographer mentors, 2 video mentors were included, with assignments to focus primarily on either the aesthetic narrative aspect of film and the other on the technical side. To talk about the assignment of roles is to actually ask whose film this would be. The answer was very clear. The artists, the 10 finalists, it was clear to us that it was going to be their choreographic and filmic vision. The role of the video mentors was to help that vision and guide the artists into the new terrain of film, to offer suggestions to help the artists realize their vision. My mentoring sessions as choreographer mentor were done deliberately in the same session with the 2 video mentors, so that I could traffic and translate between the 2 languages of choreography and film. Having done numerous collaborations with these 2 video mentors who are close friends, and being familiar with the language they use to speak about film. These mentoring sessions were recorded and are performances in themselves, revealing epiphanies, the kind of happening in the artistic process that so endear us to the making of art. Next, the performance of mentoring. One of the challenges of translating live into the virtual is how to create presence, corporeal presence, and what they call affect. Brannigan contends, quote, that the notions of cinematic presence can offer a discussion of corporeal presence in dance film, end of quote. Indeed, one of the primary reasons for involving practitioners of film as video mentors is the idea that they could help match the impact of the live event to screen and create presence. Most dance writing extol dance's impermanence, its evanescence, as Clement Chris says. And it is said that the camera obliterates all stress and strain, and all kinetic drama is lost. That's from Jack Cole. For dance film, Brannigan proposes that, quote, the idea of presence results from the conversion of the performer through the cinematic apparatus, light, movement, photographic registration, onto the screen as image, end of quote. For Wi-Fi Body 2020 as virtual body, the artists were asked very early on what the sources of lighting that were available to them, depending on the time of the day they chose to shoot. Questions on their intent and clarification on the visual information their video drafts were telegraphing to the audience were pointed up to them. There were two video drafts before the submission of the final footage. As well, the visual information given by their chosen location was pointed out to them. And in some cases, suggestions on how to animate the specific locations were given. If different locations were visually abrupt, from the point of view of the video mentors and were perhaps unnecessary. And if the artist had strong reasons to include said location, I mediated as choreographer mentor and offered suggestions or pointed out possible directions that the artist could take to bridge this visual gap with the choreographic intention. Artists were asked to submit footage involving various shots and camera distance, showing how they saw their pieces visually. And thereafter, discussions ensued, all clarifying to them intention versus execution, with cinematic and corporeal presence as the goal. Naturally, camera movement was minimal during quarantine, except if involving family or extended family members. And this is a limitation in the film language that was navigated by the video mentors with the artists. Most artists living alone tended to submit more varied options for camera angles, perhaps to compensate for the lack of camera movement for each shot, movement adhering to the shift in various camera distances and angles. Some audience have mistakenly concluded that the number of shots signaled a less egalitarian treatment of artists. This is not so, as it was the artist who dictated the terms of his or her engagement, given her or his material resources. We require the artist to write a script. Most complied, but generally, all already submitted edited drafts, which served as actual guides for the edit of the team. Most of the finalists we found were digital natives. While the festival technical team took care in the edit to match energies from various footage, including previous drafts, and manipulated some lighting effects and color graded, I would say that the overall output were films confidently attributed to each individual artist as their authorship. The films were the artist's pro-filmic performance, and as well, they generally wrote the terms for the filmic performance. This is important to mention as one of the problems curators of live events face as they migrate initiatives to the virtual, and it is that when we do go virtual, we enter into the world of film, its ethics and practices. We need to clarify authorship issues in our contracts, treat our contracts with the artist as generally film contracts with the same attention to detail in such film contracts. We need to shift our perception of our roles, as inevitably, the final product is a film or video and not the live performance. In the case of collaborations as live event creators, we are knocked off our privileged position as creators or directors in favor of shared authorship. Lacking clarity in roles, I suggest that the operative ethos should be generosity. Lacking specific clauses and binding legal obligations that happen to us, the artists do have the moral obligation to acknowledge the producing entity, which in this case is Wi-Fi Body Virtual Body 2020, and the specific festival and its presenters, the CCP and Contemporary Dance Network Manila. I found ethics coming into play as gaps in the shift to the virtual suddenly arose. As curators, we do need to keep in mind that the film video medium is not just another platform or stage to migrate to. It is a complete art form in itself, with its own language, and it is incumbent upon us to recognize the form of its labor. I know I seem to be a party spoiler in mentioning this, and I'm very aware of the existential need to create and affirm, especially from dance artists who live in utmost precarity. There is the need to assert. I understand that, and so here would like to insert my subject position. Anyone who knows me might have noticed in recent years how I have stepped back from performing or creating in contemporary dance. wallowing in retirement bliss, witnessing others create and flourish. I was already seriously looking into dance film for some time now, as my aging body led me to the camera as a means to capture that movement. I did not know the pandemic would happen and would knock me off the state of blissful ignorance and eternal discovery I was enjoying. I was now thrust into a position to be the responsible one again. And since now slightly ahead again in this genre called dance film, be the one to remind live arts practitioners of this level of respect. Like I know your nagging grandmother. But I have so much respect for the language of film and the labor that goes into it. Being left alone by my filmmaker friends to finish my dance film shot in 2018, still being worked on till today. I bring this level of understanding to the table and so consent once again to be the party spoiler. Next, the virtual body. As the initiative rolled out online on YouTube and social media, the reception was very positive with no consensus as to who was the best. This is a competition, by the way. Surprising choices by any one person reflected the range of opinions in which they ranked the pieces, including the jury. And the realization was that while I was clear that migration online was a temporary measure owing to the pandemic, and that the intention was to keep the event as a choreographer's competition, in truth, the choreography of the dancing body could not be judged autonomously in the same way it is possible in the live event. And regardless that I had intentionally specified that location and its relevance to the theme were essential to judging the pieces, implicitly implying that the use of space and rules of composition would no longer be as they were in the black box, and that rather use of space would implicitly be 360 degrees. It did not do much good in delineating the whole as a choreographer's competition. While that was possible to some degree, inevitably the works were received as a whole, and importantly, including their filmic performance. No such separation between dance and a dance film can really occur. Again, where does the dance and the dance film begin, as I earlier mentioned? That's Brannigan's question. In short, using Vivian Sobchak's explanation in her book Address of the Eye, and I put it in my words, in Wi-Fi Body 2020, the expression of the dancing body and the choreographer's perception of such body could not be separated from the intentionality of the whole, the dance film. Given the perceptive and expressive intention of the viewer, as she or he lives the viewing of the dance film in her, his body, such that what I intuit was received was the body that was created by the film. Spectacularly, the live presence was knocked off its privileged position, and instead, the filmic performance head, following Lalin Jayamain's description, transformed the phenomenal body to such an extent that one could say that the body that cinema materializes did not exist prior to the invention of film. End of quote. For me, this was then the virtual body in our fortuitous title, a type of bodily presence transforming the live physical body through the machinations of camera, as Gilles Deleuze would call it, luminous dust. This is an argument going forward as the success of the initiative online has encouraged the presenting institution, the CCP, to make this a regular event in tandem with the live one, in the hopes of maintaining the same reach and patronage that the online initiative had. For the future, this can only be a dance film competition, only specifying the degree to which movement by the dancing body is present and the degree to which filmic manipulations are allowed. It cannot be wholly a choreographer's competition. To me, the shift online was only provisional and only made necessary due to the pandemic. So, second to the last topic, the performance of social media. As we migrate our initiatives online, we become familiar with the language of digital marketing and the social media analytics. The link clicks, lifetime impressions and reach, the lifetime engaged users, the KPIs, the drop-off rate, and we learn how to adjust based on the analytics of each post, each graphic, each trailer in real time. We learn consumption patterns on YouTube, depending on the number of subscribers on the channel and on social media. The recommendation was that in the upcoming initiatives, we should adjust the duration of the program to eliminate ceremonials, to manage the drop-off rate, to consider uniform thumbnails and create videos with more faces to maintain engagement. All these are new to us who are generally used to audience count, tickets sold, etc., as quantifiable metrics for our performance. And yet, mystery is a desired value in the performance in social media. Streaming duration is part of that performance. The more limited the streaming time, or at least the need for it to be concretely specified, the more it seems to create value for the output, which seems to translate to preserving the mystery and ephemerality of the live event. I found out, especially for today's younger artists. For example, announcing streaming for 48 hours only or over the weekend, and then announcing that streaming is extended due to popular demand seems to give more value both to the work and the artist. Having heard the line, "My work is not just a TikTok video." As well, announcing the event prior to rolling it out is part of the performance, as well on which page it should first roll out from. Thus, I found social media curation quite performative, and should I be surprised? And it is an inevitable component of the overall curation for going online. For Wi-Fi Body 2020, we recreated nostalgically the experience of the live event, including 360-degree footage of our regular venue, the Black Box, and conducted the video as more or less a ritual to the missing main event. The cold recommendation after the fact was to drop the ceremonials and to treat the output as video materials and not theater productions. That sort of hurts, I know. But maybe we concede slightly as we enter this world. But there's one aspect that I refuse to concede, and it is to the admonition that social media copy should be more general, geared to a wide swath of public with a theme they could latch onto, and a note not to alienate the audience. As we migrate online, do we lose the responsibility of deepening the discourse, which form the basis of our curation? For Wi-Fi Body, it was always the choreographic discourses that contemporary dance is concerned with that we always wanted to deepen and ask our audiences to appreciate, which they have slowly through the years. Do we water down our copies and submit to the market's insistence for more attractive and newer output even in cyberspace, threatening the cyberspace with more of the emptiness it is increasingly composed of? I think as curators, we know our responsibility and must be of hefty mental constitution to navigate these contradictions. Having said that curation online is performative, I realize I ventured in another space. This is my last topic. The cinematic versus the electronic and presence. Heretofore, I have explained the curation of Wi-Fi Body as performances based on the categories and processes of cinema. Cinema is intentional and body-centered, a mediation by a perceptive and expressive being with intentionality equally received in a medium by a perceptive, expressive being with intentionality. However, as the shift to the virtual is necessarily to the electronic, I pose myself the question if we should not be talking of electronic instead of cinematic presence. Sobchak describes the encounter with the electronic as being unlike the cinematic, quote, so diffuse as to belong to nobody, end of quote. The electronic is a, quote, centerless network-like structure of the present, of instant stimulation and impatient desire, rather than, as compared to the photographic nostalgia for the past, or cinematic anticipation for the future, end of quote. The experience of the electronic, unlike the cinema, is simultaneous, dispersed, and spread out spatially across a network rather than rooted in embodied experience. It is an experience of instance and affirmation. Identity is spread out through numerous likes, calls, or existence of multiple forms of communication. This is the contradiction at the core of curation's turn to virtual, I believe. Curation is a deliberate act, a sense of reference to actual things, events, people, identities. We must remember that we are talking about curation of live events, now being presented online as a response to the pandemic. My curation of the program Wi-Fi Body Competition for 2 sets consisted of a modulation of tone, color, light, sound, all lost when rolled out piecemeal per finalist on social media. But ironically, gaining more comments, likes, and engagement, giving the initiative social media currency. At the heart of my not total concession to the demands of social media analytics is this clash of beliefs. Because electronic presence, though being, as they say, ungrounded and non-hierarchical, in fact, quote, Vivian Sobchak has neither a point of view nor a visual situation, such as we experience respectively with the photograph and the cinema, end of quote. Do we bend to its demands and contribute to the experience of discontinuities that already are part of the electronic space? To be constantly decentered and diffusely embodied even more, and more from a local point of view? Do we bend to those demands and compromise the safety of the space in which our artists can speak, should they wish to be more critical of the current government in their work? I think the answer lies within each of us. Virtuality cannot escape the liveness of actual bodies. That's all. Thank you so much.
Piersandra, for joining us today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
provocative discussions ever since first day.
Afternoon there. It's good evening.
I want to write now, Piersandra.
Truly charged. Thank you very much also, Miss Myra Beltran. So thank you so much. We will see, you will still meet. For those of you who still wants to continue conversing with Miss Myra Beltran, you can go to her exchange cafe room to meet her personally. So anyway, like we do every day from day one, we have a photo op. We take picture of everybody. I think this is the closest thing to a group picture that we can have. And I request everybody please to, again, I will say it, smile your biggest smile and your sweetest and happiest smile. All right, so
That's your YouTube sign off, Angel.
All right. My gangster self will try.
Okay, so please keep smiling so I can take a picture of 2 pages. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. One more smile. Ready? One, two, three. Perfect. Okay, so after we bring you to your direct you to your breakout rooms, we won't be coming back to the main room. So let me just thank everybody for coming again today, and we will see everybody again tomorrow for our fourth session with Miss Eri Karatsu. I think Miss Eri is here.
Aries here. Wave
Yes,
Airy. There you
Miss
go.
Eri from Japan, and Miss
Lilia.
Lilia Mestre from Belgium. So we'll see you all tomorrow. But today we have several, a couple of breakout rooms. The Meet the Presenter room with
Sorry,
Miss
Ange,
Myra
I will intervene
Yes,
first.
okay.
Before we go into the orientation of the breakout rooms, let us please thank Piersandra today for that really, really, really heartfelt also and provocative presentation. I almost cried, Piersandra, in the end.
Yes.
And because Piersandra is not going to be joining us for the Meet the Presenters breakout room.
I'm so
Since
sorry. I'm so sorry. I need to go to teach, and yes, I couldn't work to change my date. Mm.
yeah, it's in the middle of the day for her, so it's a working day. So we understand, Pierre Sandra. No worries. So please let us all give her a. I don't want to see the icon. I want to see the the
Movement.
clapping. The clapping.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much, Pierre
An
Sandra.
amazing project. What you are doing is amazing. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you to Pierre Sandra.
All
Thank you.
right, Angel, turn over to
Okay,
you.
thanks, Rosel. Okay, so just a recap of what we have this evening for our exchange cafes. We have Beat the Presenter with Miss Myra Beltran. Yes, and we have a showcase. What we have in the showcase now is Jared Luna,
Yeah.
moderated with by Lu J. Sonido. And we have Lucia Nacht at the live streaming room here in the main
Lucia,
room.
wave Lucia.
Yes. Wave Lucia. Yes.
Lucia.
Lucia. And we have, of course, the Meet the PCI Network room. I will be there if some of you would want to meet and know about the PCI Network. And we have the Meet the Partners room. We have today is Aurora Artist Residency Program in Space. So that would be with Jen Gamboa. And we have the listening room with Matugtog Kita. I just
Yay!
with
Pakita ka
Paul
naman,
Terrete.
Paul.
Just a note for this room, it will be in Filipino.
And
So,
Bicolano.
and Bicolano. Am I correct, Paul? Okay, so
Hello, yes, yes.
yes, yes. All right. So, and we have the choreographer, the Wi-Fi Body Program 3 virtual body on another room. They will be presenting the Program 3 of the Wi-Fi Body Festival. So you might be interested to go to that showcase too. Right. So, again, we ask for your patience as we transfer you to the breakout rooms. For those who are attending the Matugtog Kita and all the rest of the rooms, you want to change your rooms apart from the ones that you registered in, please message Karina Marine directly, privately, so she can actually direct you to the room that you want to go to. Okay? So with that, thank you very much and see you all tomorrow again for day 4. Maraming salamat. Take it
Maraming
away, Karina.
salamat. Okay.
You are mute, Rosel.
This Sephir, did I pronounce that right? Seth?
Yeah,
Let's
totally.
talk about cyber performance too, because but you should go to that artist talk. She's gonna talk about AI too.
I will in 2 days, right?
Yeah. But for
I will.
now, let's wait for the others who will be joining us in this room. We're gonna be witnessing the presentation and listening to the presentation of Lucia or Lucia.
Lucia.
Lucia. Spanish,
Yeah.
of course. Lucia
Yeah.
is Italian. Lucia
Italian.
Nacht, yes. So let's wait for a bit, Lucia. Is that fine?
Yeah, of course.
Spanish name, German family name.
I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Yeah, your surname is German, Nacht.
Yeah. It's German, yeah.
That's such a mix.
Yeah, bizarre mix.
Well, shall we go? So, shall we start? I think we're running late, so we better start. So this is going to be live streamed, Lucia. So we're back on YouTube. And I'm going to start now. So we're going to have a conversation with Lucia Nacht. Welcome everybody to the Creatives Exchange Room, the PCI International Symposium 2020. I am Rosel Pineda again. For those of you who weren't able to catch my name, the artistic curator of PCI, or Performance Curators Initiatives, and we are honored to have here in conversation with us, early morning in her time, Lucia Nacht, a choreographer, dancer, and video maker from Buenos Aires, Argentina. You will all hear her artist talk in a while and the presentation of her work, but allow me to introduce her properly. Lucia has a widely presented works. Her works in various contemporary dance and performance art festivals in Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Portugal, Germany, and Russia. Hopefully in the Philippines too in the future. She has developed many works, including the audiovisual performance, apparitions, the territorial with community participation performance, Monuments in Motions, which she will present today, and the immersive performance, Spatial Affects. She has mostly explored specificity or site-specific interventions, video art and installation, investigating the relationships between body, memory, territory, politics, and community, generating participatory experiences which seek to activate a reflexive and reflective critical thinker in the viewer, contributing to the construction of a democratic, affective, participatory, and supportive society. In her works, and in fact, her work Monuments in Motion, in which she will present today, was declared of cultural interest by the Ministry of Culture of Buenos Aires. Actually, I have a related question to that, but I will reserve that for later. For now, let's all hear her artist talk. Lucia Nacht, everyone. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Well, thanks, Rosel and the organization for invite me here to sharing my work with you and with your community, and also with the international community that we are taking part in this new era of virtual communication. I am going to talk about the project Monuments in Motion, Construction of a Collective Memory. It's a project that I started to direct in 2017, and I am producing till today. It's a territorial performance whose aim is to take over public space, make it present, the absence that dwell there, consists in a path
through the public space where performers and audience work together in the task of discovering the territory, its spaces and wells in order to build an act of collective memory. This path comes with an audio guide that the audience can activate in their mobile devices, and the audio contains testimonies of the people who inhabit the territory. Through the plurality of voices, the project tries to decolonize the idea of memory by offering the audience the experience of a collective reconstruction of history to question the moment we live. The following questions arise from the work as how many possible views are there for a single situation? Are we responsible for maintaining our past alive? The project develops the process of construction of a collective memory by a whole community and the power we have to change reality when we are all together and express openly in public space. During the path, a group of performers intervenes the public space, creating bonds of living memory in the question of what kind of monument represent us today as a society. So the audience is part of a process of anti-monumentalization, and the performer works with the idea of anti-monument in a site-specific way. At the end of the path, different proposals are communicated to the audience in relation to the audio guide they heard, inviting them to be part of a proposal in which they feel identified. At that time, each group is asked to create a monument where the reason that put them together is reflected. The final image of the path is made up of all these monuments forming a big anti-monument in the public space. The project tries to decolonize the idea of memory and memorial, accentuating the idea that the space of memory is man and not the monument. For marking the performance, the history of the city and the current conflicts that the society is going through are first investigated. After this research, a territory is chosen and interviews are made to the neighbors and prominent people who used to live there. Those interviews, they are part of this audio guide. And in each territory, the project works with performers that live in the city where the performance is going to be developed, and they are invited to participate by an open call. The project has been developed in Buenos Aires, Chile, Brazil, Lisbon, and Russia. So now I am going to, after this little presentation, I am going to share you a video compilation with some of the experiences. And I am going to share with you also some pictures while I am going to keep talking about the project. So I'm going to share the screen. So I don't know why I am not seeing. Let me be just a second. Here it is. I found it.
parece que son muy performáticas las movilizaciones, que construyen realidad.
La plaza es el símbolo del nacimiento nuestro.
Pocos miedos tuvimos nosotras, porque era algo tan visceral.
Como se levantan monumentos, lo que queremos dejar también como estampas son esas imágenes de las plazas repletas y que siempre la salida va a ser colectiva.
Todas aquellas personas que hayan venido alguna vez a Plaza de Mayo para expresarse, para manifestarse, por favor vengan conmigo. Todas las personas que consideren que Plaza de Mayo representa la construcción de la memoria popular, por favor vengan conmigo.
Este bairro era muito pobre. Os prédios começaram a cair, depois a especulação imobiliária, não se sabe muito bem o que está a acontecer. Airbnb, o alojamento local, que é péssimo, porque muda a identidade do bairro, não há consideração para o bairro original.
Devia ser um por todos e todos por um, mas é cada um por si.
Portugal é um país que é muito pacífico. Nós só podemos considerar vitória para todos, quando a lei mudar e toda a gente ficar bem.
Por favor, as pessoas que foram expulsas da sua casa, venham comigo. Por favor, as pessoas que sentem essas mudanças nos seus bairros, venham comigo.
Красная площадь считается памятником мирового культурного наследия. Проведение какой-либо манифестации здесь запрещено. Даже если группа людей просто соберется на этой площади, это уже вызовет подозрения. Кремлевские стены были возведены, чтобы отделить правительство от людей для демонстрации власти. Кроме того, у Кремлевской стены расположен некрополь, который служил братской могилой для павших во время Октябрьского вооруженного восстания 1917 года. Также там похоронены государственные, партийные и военные деятели советского государства.
Санкт-Петербург строился силой нескольких тысяч людей, многие из которых погибли во время строительства города из-за плохих условий работы. Памятник Ленину в Санкт-Петербурге первый запечатлел жест, который вождь показывал в своих призывах. Его отразили во многих последующих монументах, которые посвящены фигуре Ленина. История каждого общества – это история классовой борьбы.
En junio del 2000, la legislatura de la Ciudad Autónoma de Buenos Aires estableció que los edificios debían ser destinados a un museo de la memoria.
Aquí fueron concentrados y torturados los detenidos desaparecidos. Los represores organizaron los operativos de secuestro, el robo de bienes, la imposición de trabajo forzado a detenidos, la apropiación de los hijos de las prisioneras embarazadas y el exterminio de sus víctimas.
Gracias a la tenaz lucha de los organismos de derechos humanos, a los juicios que permiten condenar a los responsables, a los testimonios de las y las sobrevivientes, y a las políticas públicas de memoria, verdad y justicia, es que estamos en este espacio que hoy nos pertenece a todos y todas, diciendo nunca más.
Las personas que sufrieron violencia institucional por parte del Estado, por favor, vengan conmigo. Los que fueron presos políticos, por favor, vengan conmigo.
Esto fue 100 años cárcel y antes de eso fue un fuerte español. Pues, ¿cuánta gente no habrá muerto acá?
Pero quedaron la estructura. O sea, si tú entras, ves que realmente eran los pasillos, se ven las marcas de las puertas, de la celda donde está. Algo queda.
Con este espacio, así como la relación también es súper rara para mí, porque mi abuelo fue gendarme cuando estuve en la cárcel y mi hermano estuvo preso aquí en este lugar, y después este lugar queda abandonado como cárcel y los artistas empiezan a ocupar este lugar y yo después empiezo a ocupar como artista este lugar. Esto no se tiene que perder como un sitio de lo que es, un sitio de memoria, porque Este país, como decía Galeano, sufre de amnesia obligatoria, como que todo se olvida rápidamente. Y esto, la dictadura pasó hace poquito rato.
Y una de las placas es de Leandro Maillonave, que fue un desaparecido en la matanza de Saiz.
Mis muertos no los tengo en cada esquina para que los recuerden.
Y es que la gente no se tiene que olvidar. Está bueno refrescarle siempre la memoria a la gente.
Los que se consideran sobrevivientes, por favor, vengan conmigo. Los que prefieren olvidar, por favor, vengan conmigo.
So you've just seen a video presentation about some of the experiences. In each territory, I work on the changes that the memory has undergone over time. In Buenos Aires, I work in Plaza de Mayo, in front of it's a square that is located in front of a government house. And the theme of the performance was the different demonstrations through history that occurred in that space. So I work about the body in demonstration, and the audience ended up being part without knowing in the beginning, being part of a demonstration. In Plaza de Mayo, the first national historical monument is located in the center. I interview people who work in the Commission of Monuments, historians, also ex-combatants of the war between Argentina and England, who camped there asking that the state grant them financial support for the consequences they suffer for having participated in the war. Also, I interview mothers and grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo, who since 1976 have met there in that square every week to ask the state to give an answer for their children and grandchildren who disappeared in the last military dictatorship. I intervened also politicians who participated in the first popular demonstration there in Argentina in 1955. Also to feminist groups that have also demonstrated there, asking the state to intervene against sexist violence and femicides. And I intervened photojournalists who recorded the demonstration during the 2001 economic crisis, where people were killed by the police in that square. And also I interviewed some groups that belong to the vulnerable sector of society, asking to be visible to the society that has better economic resources. I also work on the renovations that the square had over time and how the last government placed bars to protect itself from the protesters. They also changed the tiles of the square by removing the original tiles where the mothers of Plaza de Mayo had painted the symbols of the white scarves that characterized them. The government laid new tiles and repainted the white scarves, erasing the past and removing a historical document, since the mothers painted those symbols when it was dangerous to do so during the military dictatorship. I also intervened the surroundings of the government house during the change of government last year. During the week of transfer of power, people met there to say goodbye to the former president, and a few days later, a public event organized by the new government was held, where the first measure it took was to remove the fences that divided the square to protect the government house from popular demonstrations. During those days, I interviewed the different people who participate in these events giving an account of the different political, historical, and social position about the past, present, and future of Argentina. Another experience in Buenos Aires was working in the space of memory and human rights, about how to intervene with the body, the space that functioned as the largest clandestine center during the military dictatorship, where thousands of people disappeared. We work on a sensitive and subtle body in contrast to the horror that that place carry out. Then I work also in Campinas, Brazil. I worked in relation to homeless people, who are the people who inhabit the square that I intervened. Also, the theme was about Black and slave body in a religious context, because I work also in the surroundings of a cathedral that was placed also there in that square. Also, another theme was the body in demonstration in relation to the groups that fight for their rights, and in relation to the dictatorial past that the country has. In Lisbon, Portugal, the theme was to talking about the housing crisis brought by Airbnb accommodations, where people have to move out of the capital and the city is losing the customs that characterize it. How from this fact is the first time in the country that society is actively organizing to trying to change the law. It has, the performance has been carried out in an old neighborhood and also in a tourist neighborhood where there are buildings that are historical heritage. While I was investigating about this theme, about housing crisis, an association that I met for making these interviews invited me to produce a participatory performance in the largest demonstration in the history of Portugal. So to carry out an intervention with the people who was demonstrating there. That was the first time that the society experienced a political intervention in public space into the demonstration. So I am really pleased and happy that I had also this opportunity for sharing this experience also with them. I also intervened in Lisbon, the monument to the discoveries that was ordered to be built by the Portuguese dictator, around the idea of that this monument is about colonization, what they call discovering. In Russia, I work on the historical monuments and the relationship they have with the war, where Russian people associate the feeling of patriotism with having won different wars. So the monuments are imposing, warlike, and beyond the human scale. Work was done on opposing bodies that could speak of the victims of the war at the same time as with communist symbols and gestures that the current government wants to erase by imposing Christian symbols in their place. In Valparaíso, Chile, I work in a former prison where political prisoners were housed in the last dictatorship, and now it is a cultural center and memory center. So the theme was about what is the relationship that local artists have with that place and what kind of projects are generated there and for whom. In another city in Chile that is called Constitución, I work with the community that lost everything after having faced natural catastrophes. And the theme was about how in moments of crisis, they helped each other, and when they solved their problems, they returned to begin an individualistic society. So in Chile, in both cases, I work on the relationship between dictatorship and democracy. What signs of the dictatorship still prevail in collective thought? For example, in Chile, they have their constitution was made during the dictatorship, and they have it till today. And this is also an important question that they are trying to resolve this year, voting about this, if they are going to change the constitution or not. So how also a sector of society associates the social order with the dictatorial past, thinking that that time was better because they lived in a calmer way. So that are the themes, the different themes that I investigated in the different territories. So as you can see, each territory is really different. And also the choreographic investigation is different because it's a site-specific work, and also because according of the themes that the performance is talking about. I work on the activation of territories and memories, making the viewer and the community protagonists of history, investigating mechanisms of memory as a subjective experience to question our role within a community. Monuments in Motion questions the form that power chooses to generate memory, such as the creation of monuments. I am interested in decolonizing the idea of memory and memorial. So for the development of this research, the concepts of community, memory spaces, historical heritage, personification of power in urban space, political body, citizen commitment, and memory policies, colonialism and decolonialism are critically related in order to create experiences to be shared and from an act of memory, reappropriate history. Symbols and gestures in relation to power, oppression, and manifestation are studied to find new narratives that can speak of the other side of history, where the work of remembering becomes an act of resistance. In the question of how to make visible in public space what people don't want to see, and what kind of practices can this research offer without falling into representation. I generate practices where the performative body and the citizen body coexist in the same time and space, in the act of occupying the public space collectively. The research asks how to democratize public space, so I try to deconstruct the way in which our behaviors are colonized in public space. This research contributes to new ways of thinking about performance in public space. How can the body be part of an act of resistance and decolonialism, becoming a political subject? Monuments in Motion is a project that works on the construction of popular memory. I come back. So works on the construction of popular memory and its manifestations in public space, in dialogue and opposition, sometimes with the official narratives of history. So it's a project that investigates and asks from what point of view history is built, how that history is impregnated in the memory of each society, and what kind of voices have not wanted to be heard, to be part of the official memory, and what it seems more interesting to me, why they are not included. Also, it's important to say that this is not an historicist project, because it seeks to articulate the current conflicts that a society may have with its past, and from there be able to investigate the relationship between past and present, in order to be able to give certain tools to think about why we are living this present, where many times we find that we are retraining as a society rather than advancing, the project seeks to activate the viewer's reflection on these events and provide information. So it's the viewer, the spectator, the viewer that built his own narration of history in relation to the questions that are posed in each investigation. The project dialogues with the idea of a monument by building anti-monuments in public space, created from the body of the performers and the audience that participates in the performance. So talking about the anti-monument tries to make the viewer make their own interpretation of history and the present, where the objective is that the crimes that occur in the past are not repeated again. It differs from the conventional monument because it does not seek to exalt the figure of a hero, but rather to be able to seek about the victims who saw their lives upset due to political decisions. The realization of the anti-monument is related to the idea of precariousness, taking memory as precarious in its construction in relation to oblivion, and works on the ephemerality of the human condition, where at some point our bodies will cease to exist and what remains will be the memory that we have been able to inscribe in the world with our actions. That is why I work on the construction of anti-monuments from the body in memory spaces in relation to concrete monuments in front of facades of government buildings, in squares and neighborhoods, where you can see how the community has organized to maintain the living memory of a certain event and how it was done. In each territory, I interview neighbors and prominent personalities in relation to the struggle that the community is carrying out. Then these interviews make up a narrative that gives an account of the current moment that the society is living, its problems, and the relationship with history. My interest is that the greatest number of voices can be heard, can be included in this narration, finding different points of view on the same thing, on the same event. So that is the viewer who conforms his own point of view. So at this point for me, also the project is an act of reflection. That's the proposal to the viewer. For each intervention, a site-specific choreographic material is generated, which means that the body dialogues with the space, architecture, the rhythm that each public space may have, the people who pass, and the public the audience invited to be part of the performance. Regarding the choreographic composition, I work with the idea of how to presentify the absence of those voices that do not want to be heard in relation to the idea of anti-monument, and how to establish different social relationships in public space where the performance functions as a mirror of the community, where each one can be seen as an individual working as a group to advance towards a common goal. In each territory, depending on the theme that the performance carries out, I work with specific cultural gestures related to the struggle and resistance, and these gestures are appropriated by the performance to give them value in the search of an empowered society which is organized and struggles towards a common goal. I am interested in how these gestures can be abstract from their context to open an affective space in the viewer, where it is possible to see how it is through the body that we get involved in the causes that we think deserve to be supported. My interest is to involve the viewer's body in the performance, not only from its physical position in space, but also the body as another way of incorporating knowledge, where the sensitive, the affections, feelings, and what we think cannot be separated. Appealing to this type of sensitivity in relation to concrete events in history, the interest of the project is that the viewer can incorporate the other, the different, as something of their own within the body, and thus be able to think along the other from an affective perspective and not to value judgments imposed from the point of view of power in this context of capitalism and neoliberalism, which corresponds to the ways of relating and or distancing ourselves within a society. So, incorporating different points of view and voices, the project tries to account how we are all being affected by history and how it has constituted us as a society. What we could do to change, what we could change to be able to live in a more equitable, communicative, democratic, and effective society. The social and political experience of the performance lies in being able to build a new us, a new collective identity, where each individual recognizes himself in his particularity and in how he shares it with others, generating affective ties that build memory and generate acts of resistance to the way in which we think about ourselves, to think about the other and to relate to public space, a space supposedly designed for common use, a space that belongs to everyone, but which is administrated by logics that correspond to the market, individuality and competition. With the activation of a territory, the proposal highlights what the territory already entails, the marks of history inscribed in the landscape, the type of social relationships that the community goes through, and works with these elements to communicate them in a way where the body is involved with the environment. Site-specific work is based on making physical interventions in the space that depend on and are in conjunction with the morphology of the landscape, where the body is modified according to the surrounding context and at the same time the mode of perception and the meaning that the landscape offers us, being able to reinforce a meaning or enter into discussion in the way in which we have to perceive a space according to its functionality and the way in which our body relates to certain spaces on a daily basis. What kind of rules are we following without realizing it in our daily life, in the way our body acts in public space, in the way we have to relate to the others? This project works around forgetting and memory in the question of thinking about how memory is inscribed in history. Therefore, the work of remembering is a work of resistance. This is a work that talks about the resistance of a community in public space to appropriate it and inscribe its memories in history. In this sense, this project has the importance of being able to carry out a geographical mapping from the point of view of its inhabitants, giving it the possibility of being able to know the history and current present of different territories from another point of view. That is why the video recording of each experience is very important to later share with more people the experience, and also because the experience is unique and unrepeatable. For each experience I did like once or maybe 2 times, but not more in each territory. For the realization of the project, I have always worked in collaboration with festivals and public and private entities, developing the project in the context of an artistic residency. That was also the context when the project arose in 2017. It is important to highlight this since the project seeks to social transformation and has a very strong collective character in its realization, in the relationship it establishes with the inhabitants of the place where the intervention is carried out, and also with the cultural associations and local performers. So I want to take also the time to thank all the people who made this project possible, and especially the performers who have been part of the project, with whom we jointly created the choreographic content of the performance. So,
are you? Yes. All right. Thank you, Lucia, for that presentation. I think it's resonating a lot with a lot of how we experience colonialism, even in the Philippines or even in Iran. Many of our participants here in this room have experienced one way or the other a clash with power. So may I open the floor to questions? Do we have questions? You can. Actually, I cannot see my chat box, so I'm not sure if there are questions on my chat box.
They are like saying like amazing, thanks a lot.
I've transferred to the reason is I've transferred to an iPad, and I don't think I have a chat box in the iPad. So, there it goes. I see it. So, amazing. Yes, thanks a lot. I think it's because we're. So I have a question. If nobody's gonna ask, I'm interested in the little bit about being awarded this work being awarded by the Ministry of Culture in Buenos Aires, which is isn't it kind of ironic that it's awarded by a primary state instrument for monumentalizing memory, and then it's how do you see that kind of idea? I mean, is it kind of a co-optation as well that you're experiencing there, or does it have a different kind of negotiation in ministries or in government institutions for culture in Buenos Aires? Because we're talking a lot about decolonialism ever since day one, because Amelia Jones kind of provoked us, and there was also a lot of questions about how colonialism and the project of decolonialism is experienced in different contexts. And in the Philippines, for example, this little information that you put that it was awarded by a Ministry of Culture is kind of sparked a question in me that an anti-monument project is awarded by a monumentalizing instrument of the state. So I wonder how how that experience is in your context.
No, for me, it's important to inscribe this type of projects also because it's discussing about also the official narrative, no? We are in discussion to the official narrative. But for me, it's important that the project is not like a marginal project, that also can coexist in the same level of other presentation, other performances and institutions, and how this project can also make history by inscribing this kind of performance practices into the official context of sharing of events or also festivals and performance. And also I work also in different contexts, as you can see. I can working in a demonstration with a small organization because I want to contribute to the cause that I am investigating, and also I can work also in an international festival that invites me for participating. But also for me, it's like it's a winning sensation when the project can also be in the same level of importance, so more people also can be related to the project and can know also this another kind of memories. And yeah, so for me it's important because that kind of gesture of having this Ministry of Culture's support here in Argentina allows me also to be related to another Ministry of Cultures in another countries. I won a fellowship, for example, for realizing this project in Chile. It's supposed to be this year in Santiago de Chile, but of course, pandemic situation.
Yeah.
But there was a cooperation between both countries, for example, Chile and Argentina, both cultures was an exchange fellowship. Yeah, so, but it's important also to say that I never feel that I was like censored by anyone about the context of the performance. But also for me, it's interesting because sometimes I wanted to be quite carefully about the audios and the testimonies because some people were like talking against some president, for example, and the current president. And so how you can work with these limits. And for example, with this limitation that I found, that not to be like so provocative to the current president that is also supporting in some way my work, because the festival depends from that administration, for example. For me, made it more interested in how can we communicate our thoughts, not to be just so like direct, like against someone, just to construct a concept so the other person can also reflect about how we construct our ideas, our thoughts, and not just how we are going to go like against, the power of someone specifically. For me also that quite limitation in this exchange and relationship with these administration things made that also possible. So for me also it's interesting in this. Yeah.
Thank you. So there's a comment by Seth, I think. Your words in a way reminded me of this documentary I watched some months ago about the role of architecture and sounds in resembling the city life in Moscow, those famous gray socialistic blocks. So, and he shared
a link,
a link to that documentary. So I think we have room for one or two more questions. If there's anybody who wants to ask Lucia about her work, because I have a lot, but I don't want to hog the the conversation. Is there anybody? You can just unmute yourself. Or I think we're a pretty smaller a bunch now, so it's not gonna be distracting if you unmute yourself. So no. So okay, so I have more questions, and maybe two more questions too, and then Lucia will wrap this presentation up. So you were talking about you were talking about how you're kind of careful of the people's stories, and this is problematic for most of people who are working with communities, especially vulnerable communities. And the question is two-pronged. One, how do you kind of ethically relate to the sensitive stories that they're sharing to you, and also the ethics in kind of mediating that into a presentation Because the stories are one thing. They give that to you and they trust you with it. But to mediate that into something, a new form, is also, there's also an ethical responsibility to that. And in order for them to kind of own that. The other question is, again, I go back to the decolonization and how since first day people were talking about the dangers of representational and tokenism if we are engaging with, for example, government institutions and giving us the funding or the money for it. And how do you kind of straddle that? Because for most of independent artists who are working with this kind of subject, and especially in participatory art, this is a navigation that we had to do all the time. So those are kind of the two questions, and then we can wrap this up.
So about the first question about the testimonies, yeah, sometimes, or maybe mostly, I have like 1 hour talk with the people, you know, with each person that I interview. So I started with some questions that I already have in my mind, but we are starting to have a conversation together, and also to start also a reflective process about the things and the ideas that we are talking about. So just going deeper and deeper, just to see how this person is constructing also the thoughts, which kind of perspectives that person has, and just not only the slogan, you know, about an idea, a specific idea. So it starts to be an intimate relationship that I have with each person. And then I edit those audios, because this is like a 45 minutes performance, and maybe I have like 10 different testimonies or more. So I select like 3 minutes maximum for each testimony. So the audio edition process is really hard. But I am also a video editor, so I am used to also to do this kind of work, and I also work with documentary films and also like TV shows about like journalism. So it's a hard work, but it's how to communicate these thoughts, but with a sensitive perspective. So yeah, it's a work that I think that I can only do by myself. I cannot just give it to another person. For example, okay, I am busy, I'm giving to an assistant that is going to edit these audios. Yes. No, because I had the experience to be there with that person, you know, and some people started to cry, for example, and maybe when you listen to the audio, you are not listening to the people crying. But I remember the person was crying at the moment, you know. So that's also it's important. And about the government fundings, it's quite, I think, the idea I mentioned before. For me, it's important. It's important that, because they found also like the official investigations, no, about history, or I don't know, all the things that we learn in college and university, because in Argentina we have a public university and also schools, public schools. So for me, it's really important that they are also giving fundings for this kind of investigation, and allows also the project continues like developing and also investigating, because it has no end. Because it's about the current problems in relation to history. So always we are having also like new problems or old problems that are coming back.
Yeah.
And for me, interesting that thing, no, when some problems are coming back, when you see, okay, I saw this movie in the past and it's coming again, no, and we are not going to the future in a direction and it's a line, you know, we are always just going back and just maybe, I don't know, going forward like a little bit and then like that. And this exchange, yeah, this exchange between going forward and back, for me, that's the key of the project, of what the project wants to communicate, to open these questions to the spectator, to think about what things about the past are not still resolved. So that is why we are like just forcing to going back, you know, or some situations that we thought that just passed and they occurred in the past are coming back. And also because that's the thing, if we depend about like the official narratives of history, each government can say like what they want to say and communicate about, like this is reality. And we have, for example, every 4 years, like people vote, no, for a new president. So imagine that every 4 years, someone is like rewriting like a history. The thing is about the people and community and how also they maintain their memories alive and the past alive, to not let power also write their own history. So it's a thing, I think it's in this between, into like the community organization and also the official narratives and politics. So because also, for example, for memorials, no, the memory spaces, they are public spaces and they have also the government fundings for keep them alive. So what it means to keep alive a memorial, for example, no? What kind of memory policies we are putting there? What is the relationship between the community in that kind of policies? So I think it's a debate that is not just to resume or find an answer, but it's important that these questions are always like on the table, you know, open to think about it in this communication with the community and also the official narratives and the government, etc.
All right. So I think with that, we can close this conversation. I think it's a very important prompt and provocation as well, to have and to assert really that the history is being written by the community, or the stories and the narratives are being written by the community, and not, or in relation to, if not in contrast to, if not in addition to an official narrative. You know, some official narratives are a bit conscious of and reflexive also, but it's very important that these stories and histories from the ground and from community are also being surfaced and emerging, whether they are articulated in the body, in the words, in the audio, or performance or participatory performances like this. So thank you, Lucia, for sharing your work with us.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you also in this kind of virtuality, but I think we are quite close right now.
Yeah. Even our histories are quite close. So thank you again for this sharing with us. We have limited time, unfortunately, and your day is just beginning from where you are, and my day is closing from where I am. So with that, I want to thank you again for everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you tomorrow to the PCI 2020 Symposium for another round of conversations. Catch Erika Ratsu from Japan and also Lilia Mestre from Belgium tomorrow. Bye, Lucia. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Warm hugs.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for being here.
Okay.